She had once been the most talked about CEO in her city, a woman who built her empire from scratch and was respected by every boardroom she walked into. But after the accident that left her paralyzed from the waist down, her life shifted overnight. Meetings turned into hospital visits, conferences into therapy sessions, and laughter into silence. She became a prisoner of her own success and her own fears, wondering if she would ever feel normal again. The world saw her as strong, but inside she felt broken, incomplete, and desperately lonely. Friends had drifted away, colleagues kept, conversations professional, and she avoided the thought of love altogether until her best friend convinced her to try a blind date. The idea terrified her. How could she sit across a stranger and pretend she wasn't living in a wheelchair? How could she let someone see her vulnerability without feeling judged? Yet, some part of her wanted to feel human again, wanted to taste the possibility of laughter and connection. So she agreed, reluctantly, expecting nothing but disappointment. Her friend told her the man was kind, hardworking, and genuine, three qualities she had forgotten to look for after years of chasing prestige and perfection. Still, she braced herself for pity. On the day of the blind date, she chose a restaurant with wide doors and ramps, one she had learned to navigate. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her dress, ensuring it covered her lap perfectly. She rehearsed a smile, though it felt forced. She prepared herself for the awkward silence, the lingering glances at her wheelchair, the excuses people made when they couldn't handle what they saw. For her, this was not a night of hope, but one of duty, to prove she had at least tried to reclaim life. She rolled toward the table reserved for them, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the floor. But when the door opened, it wasn't the polished man in a suit she had imagined. Instead, it was a tall, broad-shouldered mechanic, his hands still marked with traces of grease despite his attempt to clean them. He looked around nervously, spotted her, and then smiled an honest, unfiltered smile that didn't falter when it landed on her wheelchair. For the first time in months, she didn't feel invisible or pitied. She felt seen. He walked toward her with an awkward confidence that somehow felt real. Unlike the rehearsed charm she was used to from her corporate circles, high, he said, his voice carrying a warmth that cut through her rehearsed defenses. "I'm sorry I'm late. A car broke down on my way, and I couldn't just leave her stranded." His explanation wasn't an excuse. It was simply who he was, a man who fixed problems before thinking of himself. She couldn't help but raise an eyebrow, surprised by his honesty. She introduced herself, expecting him to hesitate or look down at her chair. But he pulled out the seat across from her, as if nothing about her situation needed acknowledgement. It was the first time in years she wasn't the disabled CEO. She was just a woman on a date. The conversation started slow, filled with the usual small talk, but soon it flowed like water. He spoke about his life in the garage, the stories of people he met through their broken cars, the lessons he learned from fixing things others had given up on. She listened, captivated not by the details, but by the way he valued people over possessions, stories over appearances. In return, he asked about her company, her struggles, her passions, and when she admitted her fears of never being seen as whole again, he didn't flinch. "You're more whole than most people I know," he said simply. She had no response, only silence and the sting of tears threatening to fall. Hours passed, and she found herself laughing real laughter, the kind she hadn't heard from her own lips in years. He teased her about her serious CEO tone, calling her Madam Boss, while she pointed out the grease stains still stubborn on his shirt. For once, she wasn't guarded or hiding. She was just living. The waiter had to remind them the restaurant was closing, and even then, neither wanted the night to end. She realized she hadn't thought once about her wheelchair, her limitations, or her pain. For a few hours, she was free. Asterisk, as he walked her outside, she expected the goodbye to be clumsy, polite. Maybe even a promise he wouldn't keep. Instead, he leaned down, meeting her at eye level, and said, "I'd like to see you again if you'll have me." The sincerity in his voice struck her harder than any compliment ever had. She didn't need flowers or grand gestures. That one sentence carried all the weight of respect, choice, and hope. For the first time since her accident, she felt like she had control over her life again. She said yes, her heart trembling with something she thought she had lost: anticipation. Asterisk, their dates continued, each one breaking down another wall she had built around her heart. He never treated her like she was fragile, yet he was always attentive, learning how to support her without making her feel dependent. She taught him the world of boardrooms and strategies, while he taught her the beauty of simplicity and the dignity in honest work. Together, they built something unexpected, something neither money nor status could buy. He never cared for her power, and she never looked at his humble beginnings as a flaw. They became equals in a world where they had both been judged differently. Asterisk, over time, their bond deepened, not because of grand declarations, but through small, consistent acts of kindness. He fixed the little things in her house so she wouldn't struggle. She brought him books on business, hoping to help his dream of opening his own garage. They both gave each other what they didn't know they needed: courage and belief. And as the months turned into a year, the world began to notice the change in her. The CEO, who had been paralyzed not only in body but in spirit, was smiling again. Her employees whispered about the light returning to her eyes, unaware of the mechanic who had reignited it. Asterisk. The woman who once thought love was beyond her reach discovered that happiness wasn't about perfection. It was about connection, honesty, and finding someone who could see beyond the surface. And the man who fixed cars for a living proved that sometimes the simplest souls could mend the deepest wounds. Their story became one not of pity or tragedy, but of resilience and rediscovery. She had entered that blind date expecting disaster. Instead, she found the unexpected, the beginning of a love story that redefined her life. Asterisk, in the end, she no longer introduced herself as the paralyzed CEO. She was simply a woman in love, grateful for the twist of fate that brought a mechanic into her world. Together, they taught each other that broken things, whether cars, bodies, or hearts, could always be fixed with patience, effort, and love. And in that truth, she smiled again, brighter than ever before. Asterisk.